Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette. Time for another new guest talking about their martial arts background and anything else we come up with and discuss during the topics. This guest, looking at her resume, she does improv comedy, actually. The improv thing, the thing that kind of piqued my interest, she's actually trained at Second City and the Groundlings, which if you know anything about comedy, those are two pretty top-notch places. So that's pretty cool. Maybe we'll talk about that just a little bit. But she's also a stunt person, so you've probably seen many of the shows she's been in. She's been involved in, I had to bring up the IMDb to get the whole list, but Space Force was one that jumped out for me. I loved that show on Netflix. Space Force and TV series Glow, the TV series Grimm, which was one of my favorites when it was on. But she's also a martial artist, so that's kind of how we got in touch with each other. She was recommended by a friend of mine, and we're going to have fun chatting about this. So welcome to the show, Mary Karcz. Did I get the name right?
You sure did. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Looking forward to chatting about all the things.
Cool. Yeah, I saw Grimm and my eyes lit up because that was one show that I think ended too soon, and I absolutely love that show. So it was cool that you were on there. But let's jump into the martial arts thing, and kind of like I do with all my guests, and you've listened to some episodes, so you kind of know where I'm going with this. But let's go back to the beginning. When did you have that first spark, that first interest in martial arts, and kind of what led to it?
Yeah, in the beginning. Well, there's a couple of sparks. Like one would be just how it affected me growing up watching TV and film, but I never felt like that's going to be me one day. I was a super nerd and I enjoyed all kinds of sports, but I didn't ever feel like it just wasn't really in front of me, to be a martial artist. But I would watch shows and just think like that is the coolest thing, especially seeing like Jackie Chan and how he uses everything in his space. Mm-hmm. And that it just always inspired me, but I never was like, that'll be me one day. It didn't seem like something that I could just do. And then what did seem possible was me getting lit on fire. So fast forward to a couple years later, I was really involved with the theater as a kid, and I loved a lot of it, but especially loved physical comedy. And so I did everything I could get my hands on in terms of being in shows and watching stuff. Like I used to love watching Lucille Ball and Gilda Radner and Robin Williams and just seeing all the different aspects of comedy. And so that brought me to the theater. And theater brought me to stage combat training, so learning how to swing steel and all sorts of other stuff. And then through a network of friends, I ended up getting lit on fire for the first time. And that was my introduction to stunts. Yes, maybe not in my parents' eyes, but I really loved it. And so then the world of stunts kind of opened up to me through these friends. And there are two things, like everyone's like, how do you become a stunt person? And everybody has a different road that they take. I don't think I've heard two people give the same answer, but two things came up repeatedly, and one was martial arts and the other was gymnastics. So I said, okay, well, I don't know how the heck to start into gymnastics. I was not 6. And that seems to be if you're not 6, nobody cares about your gymnastics
Pretty
training.
much,
You're not going to the Olympics, bye. But martial arts I could do. So I had found a program through the Y close to me, and I started training in Shaolin Kempo with a guy named David Meyer. And he has a group called Running Tiger, Shaolin Kempo. That was my introduction to them. Yeah,
I actually know David.
Oh, you do?
Well, not super well, but we did a open martial arts seminar up here probably about a decade ago when we were trying to find as many different styles as we could to come into town and basically take an hour or two and teach their style. And we had Shaolin Kempo, we had I think Aikido, we had Judo, we had Hapkido, we had Taekwondo, we had like I said, about a dozen different styles over like a weekend. And I'm almost positive he came up for that. I know we talked about it, and I'm pretty sure he came up. I'd have to dig through my emails, but as soon as you said Running Tiger, I recognized it. That's cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I have to say that's a really great idea because, people talk about martial arts like it's just one thing, but when you start getting into it, you realize that all these different styles of martial arts can be such dramatically different movement styles or different philosophies that are kind of behind them. And so I love that you gave people an opportunity to try so many different types in a setting like that. That's
Yeah,
really
it was a
cool.
lot of fun. And actually, I originally wanted Shaolin Kempo because there's a local gentleman up here who actually got his black belt from Ralph Castro,
Oh, nice.
but he quit training and just life and injuries and stuff. And he actually put me in touch with the Running Tiger people and said maybe they'll want to come up and try it out. So that's kind of how that happened. But
Oh, that's
yeah,
great.
that's really cool. So sorry to interrupt, but
Sweet.
definitely
No,
keep going. That's cool.
yeah, no, that was great. So that I really love that. And so that was really like my first taste of doing and not just seeing it on TV and having it being a faraway thing. And what I loved about that group is that it was such a welcoming environment. And sometimes you see like there's the Karate Kid, right? You see the different camps of training that you can do there, and it wasn't like super strict, and like you do or die, Johnny. It was just like you are who you are when you come in the door, and let's see what happens. We're going to show you some kicks, show you some punches, and I didn't, it was enough that I was able to feel like, oh, this is within my reach, And I kept training with them for I think until I moved to Los Angeles to really get into pursuing stunts 100%.
Okay.
So
what are some of the things you remember about those classes that really drew you to it? What are, that first class? I mean, obviously you'd never done martial arts before. You walk in. What was your experience in that first class like?
Oh, I have a lot of head injuries, so I'll try to remember. I think it was in like a gym setting at the Y, and it was a group of people who were having fun and doing cool stuff at the same time, and it was a good workout. And I don't know. I think that's just kind of the main thing. I always like to be learning something. Sometimes you go to a class and you're not building on a skill. You're just doing one thing, and then it's a separate activity, and they don't ever seem to draw together. And so I think what I liked about one of the things that drew me in to staying with the martial arts is that you kick and you punch, but then you build onto that, and then you're learning a combination. Whether it's like they had knife techniques. This is what I remember from training there, and so they would have like knife defense techniques. And I had already done a lot of training with my good friend Don Preston in stage combat, and he had been a Marine gunnery sergeant. And so he taught knife skills like no one else in like the stage combat world, because he lived through a lot. And so he taught me a ton. And so then when we got into like the knife techniques, the knife defense with Shaolin Kempo, I think that Dave Meyer handed me a knife and I immediately switched it into like a reverse grip or something like that. And everybody in the class took 2 big steps back and they were like, "Who are you?"
That's
I was
awesome.
like, "What?" So that was a lot of fun.
That's cool. So you ended up in California to follow the stunts, and I'm assuming you picked up more martial arts out there?
I did. I was staying with a friend who was another stunt person, and he recommended that I train with his good friend, Master Simon Rhee in Taekwondo.
Yes.
So
I'm actually interviewing him in a month or so.
Yes. Wonderful. Tell him Queen Mary says hello.
I will do that.
I think hands down, and I've had a bunch of martial arts instructors and I love them all for different reasons, but I don't think I ever thoroughly enjoyed going to class like I did going to Master Simon Rhee's class. And some of it was you walked in the door. Well, some of it was this, again, like you see the different martial arts mentalities, and it was very much a you will work your butt off in this place, but also you will be respected and it will be reciprocated. And all in a positive light of like growing. It sounds a little like, well, everyone's going to grow and be stronger. That's just me saying that. But anyway, one thing is, I'll never forget. He said early on in my training, he addressed the whole group, and he said, sometimes when you enter the building, we bow, and then when you enter the mat, we bow. And he said it's not about ego or placating anyone who's in charge. It's about respecting the knowledge that we're sharing with each other and respecting the space that we're sharing. And that really hit me hard, because a lot of times when you see certain martial artists interact and there's that like seems like an obligatory bow, like you will show me that I am the one you're bowing to.
Right.
And that to me is a huge turn off. But to have it put in that light of showing this is how we respect each other and show that we respect the work that we're doing together really hit home with me.
So you said you enjoyed movies and stuff and watching it. So did you know who Simon Rhee was before that, or did you have no idea who he was when you walked in?
I had no idea.
Wow.
I knew that my friend was like, "You've got to train with him." Okay, cool. You're his friend. Great. but also like I feel like everyone that I met was like, oh, if I had known who that person was, I would have been like a walking pile of pie. Oh, how are you? Like I
Yep.
not known how to talk. So I in a lot of cases, I'm really glad I didn't know who people were.
That's cool. So for listeners, I'm assuming, I would sure hope most of my listeners know who he is, but if not, go watch the movie Best of the Best.
Yeah.
You have to see, well, Best of the Best and Best of the Best too, for sure. But I mean, Best of the Best, he plays Daehan, and it's there's some amazing Taekwondo fight scenes in there if you don't know who he is. And I'm super excited that he agreed to do the interview, and I'm excited for that. And I think it's August or September I'll be interviewing him. He had a very busy schedule, but I'm looking forward to that. So a little sneak preview of what's coming up on future episodes. So.
Absolutely.
Cool. So, and how long did you train with Simon?
I don't remember. I like I said, it's really weird because when I look back, I'm like, oh, it felt like I was training forever. Some days I would train 5 days or more a week.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
But then I look back and I was like, I don't know if I was there for many years, but it was very impactful years. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And then, so what was next? Any other martial arts you jumped into after that?
Yeah. And I think that I don't remember how much overlap there was, but at one point I started training in grappling with Gene LaBelle.
Oh, another legend. Very cool. Nice.
Another legend. And I'll just put on my nerd cap and say, I didn't know who he was. He came to a stunt training, and somebody said, Gene needs some help. Anybody who wants to help the legendary Gene LaBelle? And I was like, I got some time. Networking's good. I'll go help. What do you need? Nice. So I helped out with one other gal. And afterwards he said, how come you don't train with me? How come I never seen you in the dojo? And I was like, sure. I don't know who you are. I had no excuse. I was like, I don't know when are your classes? And he was like, Monday. I'll see you there. Okay, great. So I went home and I Googled Gene LaBelle, and I was like, I just agreed to train with the man whose nickname is the toughest man alive.
Yep.
I don't know what the class is. I don't know if it's stunt class. I don't know if it's martial arts class, because he's known for so many things. So I was like, well, just welcome into the unknown. This became my life pattern, was just like, we'll just jump in and see what happens. And so I ended up walking into his dojo, and there were 50 men on the mat. Wow. And not one woman. And it turned out to be a grappling class.
Nice.
Yeah.
I've had the pleasure. I met him one time. I met him at the Ed Parker's international tournament in Long Beach in 1995. He was there, and I got to meet him back then. But only met him once, and he's another one on my list. I'd love to interview. So hopefully, I did send an email off just recently. So hopefully, I'll hear back on that one. But he's another one who I've seen so many interviews. He'd just be just fun to chat with and hear the stories. And said he's done movies and stuff too, but he does a lot of behind the scenes stuff. And I imagine that's just an amazing experience to train with him.
Absolutely, yeah. It was a good experience for sure.
Any other legendary instructors you trained
with?
Well,
after those, it is kind of silly. But, while I was training with Gene, he would have guest teachers come in. And so actually, I just listened to your podcast that you did with Anne-Marie DeMars, and she came into a couple classes, and
cool.
she did some guest training. Really cool. Remarkable. She is probably like a same size and height as I am. And she is just, it's just great to see her get on the mat and teach a class and have just fantastic techniques, and I think she taught us like a 2-second takedown, and you hear that and you're like, whatever, okay, it's a 2-second takedown. Does that and then you're on the mat and you're like, well, that was a 2-second takedown. I'll tell you what,
That's cool.
Yeah. And then the other person who came in and did some special teaching was Benny the Jet.
Oh, nice.
Which now I recognized by sight, and I was like, he's the guy from Grosse Pointe Blank. So
yes,
movie nerd,
exactly.
Not necessarily, so that's all that stuff.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But again,
the guy who fought John Cusack in the hallway.
Absolutely, with the pen. Oh yes. Man,
I just watched that I watched that a few weeks ago again. Such a great movie. And
oh, did you?
Yeah, he's also, the first time I recognized him from a movie was actually Diggstown, because he was the referee in Diggstown.
Oh yeah. Well, and now it's interesting that I go back and I watch movies and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Master Reed, or like, oh, there's G. I was like, oh, okay, now I know.
I know. I watch those movies. My wife's like, how do you know who these people are?
Like, because
I'm a martial arts nerd. I'm a movie buff, but I'm also a martial arts nerd, so I'll recognize people. So
yeah, and they do overlap very well together. And then my other trainer that I really enjoyed training with a great deal was another stuntman by the name of David Morizo.
Okay.
And I trained with him in Kung Fu and also Tai Chi. Wow. So it was a really great mix of like being able to train with these people who are at like the top of the game. I just feel so fortunate that I had those opportunities, because didn't deserve them for
Oh,
who I
definitely.
had sought out, you know.
Once you made the jump and got into movies and TV and working in stunts, how often were you able to keep training in martial arts? Or did you consider that part of your stunt training also? Was that something you tried to keep doing consistently?
Yeah, to the extent that I could, I just considered it to be my job is training and networking, and on the great days, you get to go in and get paid for it. So I didn't do a lot of things. So like I have some friends who would like leave town for 3 months and work on a movie, and that's awesome. I got a lot of stuff where like it was days or weeks, and normally I would get attacked by the lead, murdered or something, you know.
Nice.
So
So do you remember your first time you got to actually use some of your martial arts skills on screen?
oh, I mean, right away.
Okay.
And most of it, a lot of it was hitting the ground, which is a surprising amount of what we train with both with Master Ree and with Sensei Gene.
Right.
Is you hit the mat over and over again. So that helped an awful lot in stunts.
Oh, how to fall properly is such an important thing, and I'm surprised when I talk to martial artists, that have been doing like 2 years, and they've never learned how to fall properly. Like, how have you been training this long and not learned how to fall properly? That's so wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And people always seem a little stunned when they're like, "Can you show me something?" I'm like, "Okay, well, first you need to sit down and roll backwards." And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "Trust me, basics."
Yep.
So
I know
yeah.
when I took Aikido, I learned how to fall for 6 months.
Yeah. Oh, my brother trained in Aikido, and he would send me. He's like, all I did was fall, and I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yep. Yeah.
falling more than I am.
Fall for an hour, basically.
Yeah.
5 days a week for 6 months. I learned how to fall, and it's one of the best things I've ever learned. So,
I have to tell you, for life skills, learning how to fall without getting hurt is something I really think everyone should do.
oh, agree. I mean, that's something I
Yeah.
should just teach in high school gym class or something.
Yeah.
this,
Absolutely.
this week we're learning how to fall. Like, what? What about
What?
kickball?
Yeah. Well, you probably need it in kickball too. If you play like me, you're gonna hit the floor.
That's actually the funny you mentioned that, because if I would have known how to fall properly, I might not have blown my knee out playing kickball when I was 15 years old.
Yeah.
Which
Absolutely.
altered a lot of my martial arts going forward. So you never
Sure.
know.
I bet
You
it
never
did.
know. Cool.
Yeah.
So then, with all the styles you trained, if someone asks you what style do you train in, how do you answer that usually?
Well, I would say I train in as many as I can get my hands on. And some people are like really protective of their training, and they say like you can only train with one person.
Yep.
And I understand that to a degree. And mostly I think of it from when I was training, and you mentioned the improv, but when I trained with Second City and when I trained with the Groundlings, some people would train, and then there's also UCB, the Upright Citizens Brigade. And so some people would try to take classes at all three of those or two of them at the same time. And it's all improv, but they have different focuses.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really easy to mess up your brain. And so, martial arts is the same thing, right? Like overall, it's all martial arts. It's going to be a punch, it's going to be a block, but the different styles have a different take on them, right? So to some extent, I can see don't mess up with your mind with trying to learn 15 ways to do blocks in 3 different styles at the same time. But get the basics in one, feel comfortable with it, and then pepper in some other stuff, because I think it's so valuable for your brain elasticity to work on different movement styles. And you might find that you like one more than the other, because they are just so varied.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And like you mentioned, some people are protective and they don't, try to, I've told the story before. I've had instructors that forbid me from training in other styles. I'm like, you can't really do that.
You can't do that.
I mean,
No, thank you.
Yeah,
And that's one thing too, because I think that's really prevalent. And when it gets to that level where it's like you can't train, I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling like this is not going to be a healthy environment for me. So bye.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly what I did. I left
Yeah.
about 2 months later, so I found another school. So I've
Yeah.
actually interviewed three now improv people, improvisationists that
Yeah.
were also martial artists. And I'm kind of curious, what are some of the martial arts skills you've used on stage and stuff doing improv? How do you think that's helped your improv?
Well, I think one in general is, and I think they all kind of play together in terms of building on each other, but one is just general spatial awareness. I'll never forget, I did one class, was the early class that I did at the Second City, and the teacher was doing a lesson, and he just kind of wanted to see how people responded as he got closer to them. We were all kind of standing in a circle, and he came directly at me, and I just, I was just taking a step backwards, but he was like, martial artist, because he could tell by the distance that I wanted to keep from him and also how my body moved. But then also, one day I just used a judo throw. This guy was in a class with me and I was dropping into the class. So I knew maybe 2 other people, but I didn't know this guy very well. And we were playing a scene where I was a scientist and we were studying monkeys or something like that. And he thought it would be funny to jump on my back and dry hump me.
Oh, wow.
And nope, you're not going to do that today. So I threw him up and he landed on the ground.
Nice.
And he never did that again.
So did he know how to fall properly?
I don't think he did.
Should have offered to teach him after that.
I should have. Oh, looks like you might need a hand with some skills there. Okay.
That's funny. So now that's one thing I haven't really asked. Have you, when you've been training and stuff, have you ever done any teaching? Have you been in the school long enough where you've taught like newcomers and stuff? And have you done any martial arts teaching yourself?
I haven't.
Okay.
I've been asked by a bunch of people to teach self-defense techniques.
Okay.
It hasn't come to fruition yet. I just I think the thing that for me has been kind of figuring out where the path is that I learned pretty early on that when you say yes to one opportunity, you are in fact saying no to other things.
Yes.
And so I knew so many people who moved to LA and didn't have that thing, right? They didn't make it work. And it seemed like every one of them, their response when I was like, well, how do you feel about it? And what do you think you could have done differently? And absolutely every one of them was, I got off track. This happened and the other thing happened and I just got off track. So when I went to LA, I don't like the sun. I prefer snow. I was like I am moving to LA for the stunts. And if I can make it tier into like physical comedy, that's what I'm here for. And everything else is no, unless I really feel like maybe, yeah. So there were a bunch of opportunities that came along and I just was like, what is this where I want to spend the time? And whereas I do want to spend the time sharing some of the information that I've gained for self-defense, I really believe that that's something that can't be done as a quip. Like, oh, I can show you a couple moves, because that's not really what you need for self-defense. I think
Right.
You need like a mental state that you need to be in. You have to have a perspective. And for me to train that, I would like to spend more time really thinking about what the messaging needs to be. And so I haven't gone into that realm yet, but that's something that I think may happen in the future.
Cool. I know I've had that conversation with people before. It's like I've talked to people about joining martial arts, like, oh, I took a self-defense class once. I'm like, well, you took a self-defense class for 2 hours on a Saturday 9 years ago. Do you really think you're going to remember
right.
what you learned in that class? It's got to be repetitive. You got to do it consistently. It has to be an ongoing thing where you're training muscle memory to do it. And that
right.
unfortunately takes dedication and time. So
absolutely. And a lot of it is, like your brain elasticity and responding to that stimulus that's in front of you, because, as much as you train different techniques, like I mentioned, the knife technique, well, the knife techniques are, if the knife comes at you from this direction and it's pointed this way, or the second one is if it's here and it points there, like that gives you examples to judge from. But like you said, it's repetition, it's understanding cause and effect, and being able to just respond in that moment, because so much of martial arts and stunts is repetition. Like you said, you did this class once all these years ago, but your body isn't ready for that just immediate response.
Exactly.
And that's huge. I met an actress once who was saying, oh, I trained with this one group of martial artists in preparation for a show. And she said, I could kill you in 5 seconds. And I was like, okay.
Bring it on.
I mean, first of all, who says that to a human?
Yeah.
I could kill you. I was just meeting her. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to be over eating pizza. So come at me whenever you want.
That's funny.
It's weird. It's weird. The second you tell people that you're a martial artist, it's weird what comes out of people's mouths. Like a lot of people, surprising number of people have been like, let's fight. I'm like, no, I'm doing something else right now, And
I used to make that mistake when I first got heavily into martial arts, and I started when I was 10, but when I was in college, I made the mistake of starting to wear a lot of martial arts t-shirts and never wear that to a college party.
Oh God.
You karate man. I'm like, go away, please. Yeah, unfortunately that happens. Then during the pandemic, when this all happened, obviously movies and TV shows all got shut down. So I'm assuming you weren't able to work that way. Were you able to keep training in martial arts? Were you able to keep doing improv during that time?
I did more of like a by myself training. Some of the stuff that I think is the biggest takeaway. Like I said, I didn't train for very many years with Master Ree, for example, but some of the things we did for warm-ups were such excellent ways to get me into working out, if that makes sense. Sometimes you're in a slug and you're like, I don't really feel like doing anything. Yep. I was like, you know what? If I just do the stretching kicks right now, I'll be up off my butt. I'll just stand up off the couch. It takes like 20 seconds. I'll do the stretching kicks and fine. And once your body's warmed up, then all of a sudden you're like, wait, I could do something else. That's a miracle of blood moving around. So I didn't use it specifically to think I'm training in martial arts right now, but I did think, I'm gonna use the skills that I gathered from all this training and use it to keep me active and alert and awake. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now that everything's kind of getting back together and stuff, do you have more projects lined up now? Are we going to see you on screen anytime soon?
I sure hope so. I think so the other thing you asked also about improv. So I've taken some time to kind of look at the sketch side of things. So I've been working a little bit more on writing sketches, and I've got a couple ideas for some scripts. You might have heard that once or twice. The Hollywood lines. So yeah, I'm just kind of working on trying to veer more off into the physical comedy side of things again, and embrace more of the sketch and improv, and yeah, see where that all takes me.
So I know you mentioned Lucille Ball and people like that, and Jackie Chan. So like current people, who are some of your favorite like pure physical comedians out there?
Oh gosh, and so isn't that weird? All of a sudden I'm like, I don't know who physical comedy wise, but I just love Trevor Noah when it comes to comedy stuff. Yep. I'm just like, he just takes what's in front of him and does just such a great analysis of what's there, and somehow makes it funny, because the stuff that's going on in the world right now, it's not funny, but he finds the humor there. And so for comedy, I've been turning to him a bit. And in terms of physical comedy, I don't know off the top of my head. Then as soon as we're done with the interview, I'll be like, oh, these 17 people, Mary, what's wrong with you? Of
course. That's great.
They're going to kick you for not saying their names,
So have you got to play a martial artist on screen yet?
Oh, I have. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
My favorite one, I feel like for a while I was like 10-year-old famous. I did some shows on Nickelodeon, and one of them, the show's name was Sam and Cat. Okay. And I got to play this character who was supposed to be like a real big martial artist, like, oh, don't fight against her, she's the big thing, you'll never win. And then I got knocked out in the first punch, so that's good.
Was that the one? I think I saw that on your demo reel. Was that the one you were playing an MMA fighter?
Yeah.
Okay. So normally I ask this question a little later, but since we kind of mentioned that, what are your thoughts on MMA? Are you a fan? What are your thoughts on just the whole MMA UFC thing and how it has come into the martial arts world in the last 25 years?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. When I was training with Gene, I would go see the people that I was training with fight, because Gene especially was a big proponent of like, support your people, get out there and get in the stands while they're competing. And it's one thing to watch a UFC fight on TV and people really get into it and they're like, get him, put him in a hold. But then you're there live. And I was just like, wow, that's the lion's den. And it's a real mental thing to be there and be like, I want to cheer for my friend, but like rip his arms out feels a little extreme, Like I'm dipping into all my improv and I don't know how to support you without feeling like I'm like, rah, So I don't know. I think that there's it's an interesting time. You look at the world and there's so much violence and it's just so raw. I don't know. I appreciate it from having trained with the grappling and seeing the moves. And it's so funny because I've watched some stuff with Gene because he was also a referee for many years. And I don't know if he still is or not, but he'd look at something and be like, oh, he doesn't have them. So I'm like looking at the hold and like, oh yeah, he's not key locked. He's getting out of that thing. It's a weird split of the mind to be kind of going through both sides of that.
So is this something if you're flipping the channels and you see it, will you stop and watch it or not usually?
I think it'll depend on the fight. For a while I would go like, some people would get together and like, so-and-so's got the fight, we're going over there. So, I've watched quite a bit of it. I think it depends on what else is on TV.
That's true. See, I used to be diehard and like I said, I used to judge it and I'd never miss a fight. And just the last few years, I just kind of, there wasn't fights for a while and stuff. And I just kind of lost interest. And I probably haven't sat and watched a full UFC event in probably over 2 years.
Yeah.
And I know we have local fights coming up here in Fargo later this summer. And I'll probably go attend those if I'm in town and watch those just because I know some of the local fighters. When you know them, it's different. It's a lot different. And being in person, it's so much better. But it'll be weird also going to a fight and sitting up in the stands versus cage side as a judge. So,
it is. It's different. Yeah. It's wild.
So we'll see. But now, let's say a friend approaches you and just says, hey, I'm thinking of getting involved in martial arts. I know you do this. What are some tips you'd give them, some advice, what to look for in schools, what to look for in instructors, any type of tips or warnings or anything you would tell them?
I think it's really important to go to the school before you sign up and see how they conduct classes. And I think it's pretty clear if you're going to jive with how the group is and if you're not, because I think schools' personalities show through really clearly. So that's one thing I would definitely say. Don't hand over a check or Venmo or whatever until you feel what the group is like. But then I would also check in with the person, and if it was a friend and somebody that I knew well enough, I would talk to them a little bit about their movement styles and what they want to get out of it, because you're going to get something different from wushu than you are from a grappling class. And so that I think makes a huge difference too. Like, what do you want, So, yeah. And then also talk to people who are training there. If you go to see a class and you show up and you see how the teacher skills are, talk to some of the people who train there, see how long they've trained there, see if it seems like anyone looks disgruntled or whatever, because sometimes people train at a place because they feel like they don't have somewhere else to go or whatever. So, and if anyone around them is cool enough as you are to like put on some workshop where you can try out a bunch of different styles, definitely go to that.
I'm hoping we can do that again. We haven't done it in many years. We did it for about 2 or 3 years in a row, and I was doing it with another guy, and he's like, I want to do it a different way. He wanted to change it, and he didn't want my help anymore, and then it kind of fell apart. So unfortunately, but it was the biggest one we had. It was 2 days, and I want to say it was 12 or 14 styles. It was a lot of fun. I mean, it was the only style I couldn't get that I wanted. I tried to get a capoeira instructor from the cities to come down, and the weekend wouldn't work for them. And that'd just be such a cool, martial art to see live. I've never seen that in person.
I did get a chance to train with some capoeira people, and I have to tell you, that was so intense. And if I had not been on the path to like, I'm focused on stunts right now, I would have been like, boom, I'm here all the time.
Really?
In order to do the first level of like their ranking, it's not a belt, it's similar, but whatever. You had to like run 5 miles and swim 2 miles and be able to do something like 50 or 100 handstand push-ups. Like, this group was so intense. One of the classes that I went to, there were only 2 of us there. A friend of mine and I went, and we had to do 500 of every kick, both sides.
Wow.
Front kick, 500. Oh, no, that's not enough. They put a chair in front of us so that we had to kick, like the kick was supposed to be at a certain height. And so they put a chair in front of us, and we had to kick 500 times each leg over the height of the chair. And if we didn't, I mean, then you got to just keep on going, and there's just me and one other person. So it's not like you could like hide behind the ranks and be like, oh, I'm really exhausted right now.
Wow.
And then when they were done with that, then they were like, great, now we're going to do, what did we do next? Cartwheels. And I think we did 100 or 200 cartwheels each side. But it was like to the left, then to the right, to the left, and then to the right, and to the left, and then to the right. And if you didn't throw up, I mean, and like I said, you couldn't hide. So that was very intense training, but I loved it. It was great.
That's really, do you remember who the instructor was for that?
I wish I did. I thought about it at the last minute. I was like, I should have looked that up. But that was also through the YMCA, the same place that I met David Meyer of Running Tiger. So
probably the person I talked to then, because I think there's only 1 or 2 capoeira schools in Minnesota. So
I mean, I think it's pretty likely. Yeah. But I had a lot of respect for them too. I mean, the work that they did, and just so great.
I was hoping you would have said you did that in California and maybe trained with, I think it's who's the top one out there? I think it's Amon Santos.
Oh yeah. Just throw down another name for you.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, here, this guy. I didn't know who he was, but I went for a Friday anyway.
Nice. Well, he's the guy who, if you saw the movie Only the Strong, he did the choreography for that, and he trained Mark Dacascos for that movie. So
nice.
That's a cool movie. So then in all the different styles you've learned and stuff, I'm sure you've learned some of the traditional versus some of the sport and everything like that. Is there some philosophies you learned that you really remember and they keep coming back to you and stuff?
Oh boy. I mean, one, I think, and this came from Gene, not all moves work on all people. So when you're grappling, I would normally be working with a friend of mine who's a stunt guy, and he's like 6'4" and I'm like 5'2". So he's a much bigger build than I am. So I'm trying to like choke him or whatever, and my arms couldn't get around him. So like that, that's a thing. And then like he would try to choke me, but he was so like so much longer than I was. I could just get out of any hold.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I think, just like something to keep in mind. Like some people have like that move that they do, like, oh, this is my knockout move, or like this is my knockout choke out. You get the idea. And so just keep in mind, like that might not always work. Like that's great that you feel really strongly about your move, but like you need to adapt, and that's in life as well as martial arts. It's we need to respond to what's in front of us, not to what we think is in front of us.
Oh yeah, I mean, someone that you're facing is hopped up on drugs. A lot of your moves probably aren't going to work on them or affect them that much. So yeah, you got to know that. Yeah. And the same thing with like when you're talking about women's self-defense earlier. One thing we rarely teach in our women's self-defense class is a groin kick. Tell them to go for the foot stomp and try to smash and break their foot, because that'll hurt a lot worse than a groin kick on most people. So.
Yeah, and like a TV and everything, like everything points to like get him in the groin. Like you know what? Everyone's going to see that coming.
Yep, exactly.
Give him a thumb to the eyeball and get out of there.
That's a good one too.
But also, I think, and this is to the point of like, well, what do I really want to get across? But in self-defense, I would say as many times as you can, don't be in the situation. So much of it is about the framework of your mind of like, where are you and did you have to be there? And so some of it is just thinking ahead in that way. Right. But also, like if you're in that situation, don't go for the groin. TV told us that's where to go, so don't.
Kids, don't believe everything you see on TV.
That's amazing.
Pretty much. So now you mentioned some great people you've trained with and some you've looked up to, like Jackie Chan and stuff like that. So if you had to pick one martial artist that you put on the top that you just really look up to, as whether it's someone you've actually trained with, whether it's someone from movies or something, who would you put on the top of that list?
Okay, it's so hard to narrow down, but I'm going to do it like this, specifically because he was such an early inspiration too, and because he combines both worlds of the improv and the physical comedy and the martial arts. I'm going to go with Jackie Chan because he's just such a well-rounded in all of the things, that drew me together and into martial arts and into stunts and all that. So yeah, I would say.
So have you ever got to work on a movie with him?
I have not, but I'm not dead yet. So
that's right.
We'll see.
And neither's he. He's
right.
Still going, still making movies. So
that's right.
They don't make him like him anymore. That's for sure.
He's definitely, he's one of a kind and very inspiring.
So you're a fan of Jackie Chan. Have you ever seen any of the Tony Jaa movies?
Maybe, but this is where I'll say like, I don't know a lot of names and stuff, and I've been hit on the head a lot. So
his biggest one that most people know is Ong Bak.
Then absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
that I always talk about that chase sequence in Ong Bak. That's like 14 minutes, completely one take, unedited, where he's like jumping over cars and through hoops and stuff. It's so cool.
So great. Very just awesome on all counts. Yeah.
So do you have a favorite martial arts book? Either one that you read multiple times, or if someone else asks, you recommend it to them right away, and why?
I really like the some of the biographies or autobiographies that I've read. I think more than like how-to books. I think the two that I feel kind of the strongest connection to, because I trained with the people, are Gene LaBelle. He has an autobiography, and Benny the Jet. Really insightful. And like you mentioned, like how many stories people must have to be training at this level and working, both in TV and film, and also having the martial arts background. So those really resonated with me.
Yeah, I love Benny's book. That's such a great book. And I just realized I don't have Gene's book. I could have sworn I did, and it's not on my bookshelf. So I wonder if maybe I had it and borrowed it to somebody. I don't know. That's
definitely what happened to my copy. Someone's like, "Oh, you've got this?" And I was like, "I sure do. I did." Okay, well, we'll see that later, I'm sure. Nice. If you love something, set it free.
That's right. So. I'll have to order another copy, because that's
yeah.
I remember I read it probably when it first came out, and I definitely wanted to get that one again. So all right, now the fun one, everyone's favorite one: favorite martial arts TV show and favorite martial arts movie.
Okay, here we go. I'm gonna zag where everybody else zigs. Right. I'm gonna actually point to a video game.
Ooh.
So there was a game I think it was for the PlayStation 2 called Oni, ONI, and it was a third-person video game. And a lot of these video games would be like, it's a shooter thing or something. But this was the first game that I saw and played where like you had the option of doing hand-to-hand combat. And it was like, punches, but also kicks and like sweep the leg, Johnny. And so for me, it was like the first time that martial arts went from something that I saw on TV into something that I had some sort of say in. Although like the way I played the video game was like taking the controller and like smashing all the buttons at the same time. And I was like, do something cool. It's kind of how I go at life in general, I think, but whatever. So that one. And then also I'm gonna go back to Grosse Pointe Blank, because that fight that Benny and John Cusack had in the hallway, I was just like, that is just so cool, and it stayed with me. And there's a bunch of other moments too, which I don't know then some people are very fussy about what qualifies as martial arts and what's Western fighting or whatever. I'll leave that to philosophers on the subject, but there's a moment where somebody like turns around and smashes a TV over someone's head. It was just so unexpected. The first time I saw it, I just lost it. So yeah, that one's pretty high up in the book.
That is a great movie. That's one I watch at least once a year. I have about a dozen movies I watch once a year at least.
Yeah.
Like Roadhouse is another one with some great martial arts fight scenes, and I have to watch that at least once a year, or the world is not complete. So
for sure.
and the nerd in me, I also watch War Games once a year. That's really dating myself a little bit.
No, but it's an oldie and a goodie.
Yeah, no martial arts in that one, but still a great movie.
That's right. Yeah.
It was funny you mentioned video games. I was trying to actually think back to the first martial arts game I can remember. And once again, dating myself, this was probably like 1986, back on my Commodore 64, logging in, and I had a video game. It was called Bruce Lee. and I need to actually go now on YouTube and see if I can find it. Because, I mean, in my mind, it had like these amazing graphics and stuff. And I'm thinking back, it was probably like worse than Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. It's probably just horrible graphics. And, using the keyboard to like, or spacebar to step forward 3 times and like one of the arrow keys to throw a kick or something. And
for sure. It's probably like an 8-bit game, right? I remember looking back, I thought so highly of Tomb Raider, right? Whenever it came out, my turn to date myself, right? And I was like, oh, it's so cool. She could climb up a wall. And then when she got to the top, if you knew this one combination, she would do a handstand and then roll out of it. And then I went back and watched it and I was like, oh my gosh, I might be able to draw a little better than this. But at the time, it was all cutting edge, I
might have to actually add the video game question going forward, because that's actually kind of a fun one. I like that.
Yeah.
That's good. So just to kind of like that, I mentioned a few of the things. Just what are some of the movies, TV shows that some people can go back and watch that you really enjoyed doing, that if they want to go back and check out some of your stuff?
Oh, that I did.
Yes.
Okay, one thing that I absolutely loved, and again, I'm going off the question here, but I got to participate in this event for Google Glasses when they came out with the glasses that you could put on, and then you could do hangouts with people and you could see, and they did a demonstration for a developers conference back in 2012, and it was held at the Moscone Center in San Francisco. And I was one of the rappellers. So I got to be part of this live thing where I had on the Google Glasses. There were 3 rappellers, and 2 of us went down Aussie style, so face first, and it looked like we were running down the side of the building, cool. Rappelling. And that's really cool. So that's like a YouTube link. If you put in like Google Glass IO 2012 or something like that, It should show up. And what a cool thing to be part of. So then some other stuff, like I had such fun roles on Nickelodeon shows, like Sam and Cat. I mentioned there was the one where I was the martial artist, and then there's another one where I played a security guard in a prison. That was kind of fun. And then I got to be in there was a new Pee Wee Herman movie, Pee Wee's Big Holiday, that I was one of the sisters in. It's around the 30-minute mark or something like that. There's like 9 daughters and I'm one of them. It's pretty fun. Most of the time I'm doubling somebody, and I always joke and I'm like, oh, that's my left elbow, So
how cool was it to work with Pee Wee Herman? I mean, obviously he's someone I've loved since I was a kid, and even my kids grew up watching him and stuff. So how cool was that to work with him?
It was awesome. I mean, that production was really great to work with, and I got to work with him directly in some scenes. It was really fantastic human being. And one of the scenes we were in, like a lot of times, this from your podcast, but like for sound reasons, you can't have air conditioners running all the time or whatever. Mm-hmm. So we were filming in this church. There's a wedding scene in it. So we're filming in this church, and I was one of the few people that needed to be in this scene. And at one point he came up to me and like gave me a little personal fan. And I was like, wow, that is so cool. And no one, like, that's the kind of thing that like, you're lucky if someone in production does that, but like to have that be an experience from someone who's like so well renowned, and like My brother was like, oh my gosh, did you get to work with Cherry? And I was like, no. Well, that would have been great. Yeah. Yeah.
And one other question is, I just thought of now. I know I've heard, talking to people in the movie industry and stuff, I've heard horror stories of some like rude people, and I don't want to ask that. Don't want to have you put anyone out there, but other than Pee Wee Herman, who are 1 or 2 celebrities you got to work with that was just a great experience? They were really cool and just fun to work with and gracious and stuff. Oh man,
I mean it's like a career's work, right? I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really felt like I didn't have those nasty experiences with people just in general. Cool. So I think when I worked with people, they were all really great. I'll say this though, because you mentioned Glow. I got to work on the pilot episode of that, and I just loved working with everyone who was in that cast and that crew. That production in general was just Oh, it's such a delight to be on. And I know one of the fellow stunt performers was like, we were hired to not make the team. Like that was the whole point of us being there. And this one gal was like, how do I get it so I'm always on this show? And meanwhile, we're in like 80s leotards. I was like, how's this as soon as fast as I can get out of this wardrobe? you know?
That's cool.
But really, really cool. From the creator down to like absolutely everyone I came in contact with is really phenomenal.
That's awesome. Well, I just want to thank you for taking the time to do this. It's always fun to talk to people with different backgrounds and learn about, how martial arts has helped them in their everyday life. Obviously, you kind of used it for your career and more than one way. And I just appreciate you taking the time to tell us about yourself.
Absolutely. And thank you. I appreciate being able to share some of my tales with you and your listeners. And I'm excited to listen to the podcast that you put out and learn a little more from the other fellow martial artists.
Cool. And I will definitely put a link to your website on there, and I'll find that Google Glasses one too, and I'll put the link out there when we release the episode, because I want to watch that now too. That sounds kind of cool. So.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, and thanks for your time.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.